Might as well go ahead and get started today. What is it, Saturday, May 10th, 2025. And it's an exciting day. It's the inaugural episode of the San Antonio Referral Room Podcast here with Bert Taddei. I'm Rich Dancer, Threefold Productions, Santino Properties. And the question came up, why are we doing this? Like, what are we here for today? And the long and short of it, from my perspective anyway, this podcast I feel will be helpful and beneficial for anyone who tunes in, who joins, who hears it, comes about it anyway, because this is a knowledgeable man here in terms of real estate, home ownership. I've always believed home ownership is a game changer, and you won't find someone out there that's more staunch advocate, a more vested person than Bert. And so me personally, for Threefold Productions, the reason why I was excited about this project was for the fact that he played such a huge role in us, my wife and I, my kids, having our first home. Not to mention the fact that with Threefold Productions, with Phenomenon 2.0, we help empower the next generation of leaders. And one of the conversations I always have with our phenomenal compassionistas, with our ambassadors who are, college students, young adults, is the importance of, as you're going off to be game changers, home ownership, that property ownership can be a game changer, for them as well. So it made perfect sense for this to happen. And I'm grateful to be a part of it, this initial launch of the San Antonio Referral Room. With that being said, I would like to introduce Bert today. How are you doing today, Bert?
I'm doing great, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the time that you guys have taken. To not only today, to be here and for us to launch this really exciting podcast that I'm really just beside myself, with excitement about, but also the fact that leading up to this, right, the different topics that we want to discuss, the different people we want to interview around the city, and things of that nature. So I really appreciate your willingness, to help us launch this and kind of be a part of our community in a different way.
Yeah, yeah, and that's part of it that I didn't mention initially is that this is just the first of many, of course, and it'll actually be Bert sitting in the seat moving forward, and he will have key components, representatives of the homeownership process sitting in the seat across from him. So he'll have far more insight into what questions to ask, to pick their brain, recorded on video for everyone to benefit from and learn from and apply to their own journeys of, in these different categories of how to become homeowners. So another reason that I left out in the initial, kind of introduction of why we're involved is not only the compassion, but the passion that you bring to what you do. So where does that come from? What's the origin story behind the noticeable difference of when Bert Taddei is working with you to get into your first home or to your dream home or your forever home, whatever it is, versus going down the street and picking up the first realtor card that you see and just calling and getting started that way? What's the Bert Taddei difference that's noticeable? It's such a noticeable thing we can attest to.
Well, thank you. First of all, I really appreciate the kind words. And yeah, so I think a lot of that comes from the fact that I believe that we're called to be servant leaders in our community. Well, what is that, right? And it's more than just a slogan, right? Well, we have everybody who's talking about servant leadership, and what it is basically is just giving back, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if it's something as simple and fundamental as the Bible that we're talking about that teaches us to also be servant leaders, or if it's just a basic concept to do unto others as we want others to do unto us, the golden rule. No matter what that is, it's important for us to be willing to give back, right? We have to be willing to be there for people just as we are for ourselves and our family. We also have to be there for others, right? I think you'd agree that we would be in a far different place as a community, as a city, as a country, as a global community, if we would just be willing to, to try to take a moment to understand the other person, but more importantly, also to try to help the other person, right? So, as far as the real estate is concerned, so I started my real estate journey in the summer of 2014. So we're just at about, like you said, today we're in May, in the month of May. So, in a month or so, month two, it'll be 11 years for me in the real estate business. And from the beginning, I was asked many, many, many times before, because I studied English in college here at UTSA. Like, okay, well, are you going to be a teacher then? And I'm like, it's just I didn't feel the calling to be a formal teacher per se. However, I feel like real estate is a vehicle through which I could be a teacher or an educator, if you will, a coach when I'm trying to help my clients achieve their objectives, right? So I've never been told by a client, okay, dude, I get it, right? I mean, it's long-winded responses. I'm not into that. If you work with me, chances are I'm probably going to want to educate you along the way. That way you understand what that piece of paper sliding across the table to you, to asking you to endorse, it's paperwork that's necessary, but here's why it's necessary. Here's what we're going to accomplish here. So that way in your mind, you're not putting your John Hancock on something that doesn't make sense, or why am I even looking at this? So along the way, listen, the real estate business is a very complex process. It's not an overnight event, right? Nobody wakes up one day and says, "Let's go buy a house today," right? It's a process we go through, right? So, wouldn't you want for your fiduciary, or your trusted agent by definition, to be just as vested in that education aspect, so you could understand better what it is that you're about to embark upon, right? What are you about to endorse? What are you about to do? Why are we doing the inspection, right? And, likewise, this is not at all, way to pat myself on the back, but it's simply, really just to kind of state the fact that I have over 150 videos on my YouTube channel now. Why is that? Because the vast majority of them are education based, and some of them are just as basic as a recap, a real estate recap for the statistics for the month before, the last full month before. That's educational, right? I consider it to be educational as well, as I'm educating the public about the real estate market in San Antonio. I try to, sort through the hoopla, the hype, and even the media negativity that we hear about the real estate business, right? I'm giving you the facts, right? Will I, interject some comments or some opinion? Maybe, but it's really to kind of help people to understand, well, this is where we are, but this is why we are at where we are, was why we're at this point, and what we can do about it, perhaps benefit us if we've been contemplating either a home sale or a home purchase.
Sure.
Or an even investment in real estate, right? So I guess the long and short, to make a short story long, as my wife likes to tell me,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm basically saying that, what I like to be an educator to my clients. And that from the beginning has been something that's been very important for me personally, because I come from a long line of educators. My mother, her sisters, my grandmother, my grandmother, but my grandmother on both sides, because my dad's mom was a nurse, but she teach nursing, but she was an educator. So I come from a long line of educators, and I want to. I feel like that's my calling, to give back. I can make a living for my family. That's great, but it also it's in servitude to the public at a high level.
Yeah. So that kind of led into another question that I had. You answered it, which was, how did you get your start in real estate? But I guess more specifically, there were quite a few peers who, believe it or not, I didn't graduate college that long ago. It was not ancient times, so I can still remember the decade or so in the past, 10 to 15 years, where a lot of friends graduated from college and real estate. Oh, you can make money in real estate. So they're getting into it in, for that perspective of there's money to be made in real estate, which was definitely true because San Antonio has been kind of a booming place. And I understood their choice, but not, you don't always hear people saying, I got in real estate to give back, or I got in real estate to educate. So what was that spark or that moment where you decided, okay, I want to give back, I want to educate, and real estate is going to be the vehicle that I use to do those things. So what was it about real estate, or what was the moment where you decided real estate was going to be how you gave back and educated?
Sure. So for years and years and years, um, I have been told, because of my ability to sell. I told you a story about when I was 10 years old, knocking on doors, to sell the newspaper, because I always knew who my customers were, but I also knew who my customers were not, right? And I was knocking on the door, hey, you want to subscribe to the newspaper? We have a daily edition and we have a Sunday only edition, which would you prefer? Which it sells, right? Um, so people had told me for years, you should go into insurance sales. And I love my insurance agents, right? They're awesome. They're really good at what they do. But can I tell you, wasn't my calling. I tried it back in 97. I was living in Austin, and it was before the whole Austin boom and whatever. And we were living in a real sketchy place and area of town that wasn't very nice and whatever, and trying to make a living, selling insurance. And I crashed and burned miserably. I mean, just wasn't for me, right? I think I ended up leaving. I didn't close the deal, and I ended up leaving owing money to the people that were sending me leads. Supposedly they were like qualified leads, and I would call them, and I told those people leave me alone and whatever. So insurance wasn't for me. It wasn't my calling. Other thing, I was told, because of my communication skills, that I should be an attorney. I have respect for the attorneys and judges and the law and everything. It's great. I don't know, enough about the system, and I didn't wanna learn. It wasn't something that appealed to me. It wasn't something that I wanted to embark upon, right? Real estate, I think, to answer your question, I think it was really something that said, because I came back from living in Illinois at that time, flat broke and busted. I mean, I came back, less than 0, as they say, right? Because I owed money, right? I'd lost a job out there in suburban Chicago, and I was literally, swiping the Amex card every single month to pay for my Cobra from the job that I just lost, right? So anyway, so we owed a lot of money. And what did I do? I got into the real estate business. No benefits, no vacation, no sick time, no health insurance, no, discernible future unless you could just hustle. So I thought, you know what? If I can hustle, I can make money in real estate. That's great, but I can also feed my family, and I can, you know what? I think I can help people at the same time. So around that time, I thought, because I started having a paradigm shift, right? And in my mind, right? And I guess we come to a certain, because at that point I was 44 years old when I got into the real estate business. And I said, and that was right around the time my mid 40s. And I said, you know what? There's something bigger than just me, right? Still wasn't reading the Bible yet at that time, that kind of thing. But I just felt like there was something bigger than me, right? And there was a reason that I should want to give back to my community. There's a reason why I should want to give back to society. And listen, I want to be on some soapbox saying, well, look at me, I'm giving back. And because again, I feed my family also by doing this. But you know what they say, if you enjoy your work, you don't work a day in your life, really, right? So, and I love serving families. I love real estate business. So to answer your question, it was right around the time that I started. So it was probably about 11 years ago. That's when I realized that I could actually also do some good,
Yeah.
along with that. So it's kind of a, like they say, the win-win, it's
Yeah.
a little cliched, but
No, it makes
yeah,
perfect sense. It makes perfect sense, and it's noticeable. Like I said
thank you.
earlier, it's noticeable. Um,
Appreciate it.
but even with all the passion that you have, even with it being a calling, that's all on you. Like that's all on your side of it. With um, for whether you're talking about the Bible and Jesus sending out his disciples to go be fishers of men and witness to people, or even one of my aspirational mentors, Carter G. Woodson, learning during his time in the Philippines, when you're educating someone, you have to, speak to them in their culture, speak to them, in a way that resonates with them for it to stick. And Jesus and the disciples out, they used parables, they used, they talked to people. They were relatable men, and they talked to people in ways that they can understand and relate to. And right before we started recording, I heard you speaking Spanish. You were talking to someone, you were, and like here in San Antonio, Texas. What I guess does that lend to you being able to, fluently speak Spanish, being able to understand cultural nuances, things like that? What benefit does that lend you, especially in a market such as San Antonio, where such a diverse influx of people seem to accumulate?
Sure. So that's a great question, and I'm glad you touched on that because I was going to mention, somewhere down the line, I guess that that I'm also a Spanish speaker now. The heck, and I'm Mexican American. I have roots also from Spain, and I just listen. I mean, I for years and years and years, I wanted to be able to speak Spanish. It wasn't until about 27, 28 years old when I really started to learn Spanish. And in conversations, right, I share an office with a gal who ended up, being kind of like a Spanish teacher to me, because she would talk to me in Spanish only, and she didn't speak a lot of English and didn't want to, frankly. So I found myself, always only responding to her in Spanish. It's what she preferred, and she let me make mistakes. She might laugh at me a little bit, whatever, but she would make sure that she would correct me at the time, and she would tell me, because and like anything else, it's the repetition, it's the practice, it's the conversation, and that's how you really learn another language, right? I have a, I guess, a will, a desire, and to also learn Italian. Sometimes, because Taddei is Italian. I had roots from Florence and Italy. So one day, sometime I'd like to also learn Italian. But anyway, going back in Spanish, it's relevant to here to San Antonio because we have so much opportunity with Mexican clientele, frankly, that end up here, because of our proximity to the border. And, I-35 leads right into, Laredo, and then Nuevo Laredo, and then skip, hop, and a jump to Monterey from there. So you get a lot of folks in Monterey, and I befriended a Mexican national from, I was going to say DF, and they're not even call it that anymore. It's the Distrito Federal. It's basically, that was like the capital, right? Mexico City. It was Mexico City. And it was funny because he actually responded on Instagram to one of my posts or one of my ads or something like that. And I called him up one day, to follow up on his inquiry, and he's like, "Hello?" It shows that he was in Mexico at that time. And, he, actually ended up, saying, "Well, I'm not in town right now, but I'd be happy to meet with you, have coffee with you maybe, next week when I'm back." And I tell you this story as like an anecdotal, simply because, something as simple as that, and because of my ability to speak Spanish, my wife is from San Luis Potosí. So she's from the capital of that state, which is right smack dab in the middle of Mexico, right? Diana is. And because of that, she's been obviously my Spanish teacher since the days when I shared the office with a gal who's her cousin, by the way. She also introduced us. Oh, well. Yeah. Anyway, it's kind of funny.
That's like a cool story in and of itself.
And but my friend, and he became my friend, and I got to know him, because he's also a real estate investor. And we got to talking about, just kind of the market and just everything. And yes, I got some 1031 money, that I'd like, exchange money I'd like to invest. And, what do you think I should do with it? And I gave him my thoughts, and he found it to be very helpful. It was a good resource to him. And uh, next thing we're kind of spending more time together, hanging out, and then we went into business together on one deal, on a franchise, and then we ended up, we've had Thanksgiving the last 2 years together. I mean,
Yeah.
just a marvelous family. Live right here in Stone Oak. We're actually sitting in one of my listings that just sold. It's about to close escrow.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, here in Stone Oak, a lot of competition, a lot of. I mean, we can kind of touch on that another time. How we did it. How we won. It was very very creative, and it was really cool. Anyway, he lives around the corner, right? He lives here in Stone Oak, and just a really cool guy. And we've gotten to know his our wives are friends now; they're friendly, and so we kind of kind of do that. But because I spoke Spanish, and he's even told me, "Hey, look, we wouldn't be friends if you didn't speak Spanish."
Yeah.
And he didn't speak much English, and he's learning, but at a very slow pace. So the fact that I speak pretty good Spanish,
Yeah.
he understands me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he corrects me, and so because of that, we're able to, kinda do some business, right? And so it's been a tremendous
Mm.
help to me. In fact, after this, I've got a conference call or Zoom with a gentleman in Mexico who, is a real estate broker down there, and I'm introducing to a gentleman that I've worked with over here, owns land with some partners, down, near San Miguel Allende, Guanajuato, and they own some land out there they wanna sell. So I'm kinda connecting people and that kinda thing, and, because I know people all over the United States,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
Mexico's a different deal, right, obviously, and I know some Mexican brokers as well over there, but again, because of my ability to
Yeah.
speak Spanish, I'm able to make those connections.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So your ability to meet people where they are, meet people as they are, and kind of work from there. We could attest to that as well because just not even just culturally speaking, but from our starting point, we were at a rough origin story to our real estate process, and you didn't walk away. You were patient, and you worked with us throughout the process. And I know that you bring that to everyone, where you're meeting them where they are culturally or in terms of their readiness. All of that is well and good. Having been called and having a calling to do this, that's great as well. But having a calling and even meeting people where they are being relevant isn't enough if you don't produce. But you have a proven track record for producing. And I know you mentioned, and if I botch it, please correct it, but it's the Bert Taddei Perfect Home Finder system. And so you've got those things working for you. You start calling, you bring passion to it, you meet people where they are, but it works because you work. So because your processes work. Can you speak to those a bit? What sets you apart in terms of actual production within real estate when it comes?
Sure. So, that's, a really interesting and proprietary method. So, quick story I'll tell you about this because my Perfect Home Finder is not only proprietary, but I frankly don't know of anybody else in San Antonio who's offering it. So it's a very crowded field, right? Last time I called the board offices and asked them, which wasn't that long ago, they said there was 14,000 of us that were members of the local board. Okay, that's a lot of people you're competing against, right? So how are you different? How are you unique? Right? Because if you're talking about setting up a search, they can do that on any one of those consumer platforms like Zillow.com and Realtor.com. They don't need you for that, right? Especially after August 17th, and we won't get into that right now, but when the whole commissions structure changed for buyers and having to pay their realtors or sign something to be able to see property and things of that nature. They can't tour property with a broker or a real estate professional until something is put on paper, right? If something is endorsed, they'll agree to pay that broker. Now, there's a lot of ins and outs about that, but what it comes down to basically is that the Perfect Home Finder program is really, really cool, and it's a slick system simply because yes, you have, like I said, these consumer sites. It's an IDX feed, right? It's Internet Data Exchange through the local board and the local MLS, the multiple listing service. It automatically feeds out to over 100 websites, and that happens automatically through syndication, right? Wasn't and through that, any consumers can find the homes that are available for sale. That's great. However, the best houses are never found online, frankly. Right? I mean, the honest truth is that some of the best homes that are sold
Mm.
are never on the public market. They're sold off market. So so the light bulb went on. I said, this is a really interesting thing where I can serve the public at a different level by employing, again, a perfect home finder program. And it's a proprietary method whereby we take all of the criteria, all the must-haves, it's school district, if it's a zip code or if it's a commute to work, whatever's important to that family or that consumer, real estate consumer. And what we do is we take all their criteria, all their must-haves, everything that they want. And we send our marketing dollars out into the community, help them find that special home they want to move to, right? That special place. And say, well, wait a minute. Are you saying you spend money on your buyers? And the answer to that is yes, upfront. And by the way, we don't ever get paid or reimbursed until closing, right? So I'm footing all the risk on that one, right? Because it may or may not close, right? But at the same time, I've worked with a lot of families that basically my marketing system introduces them to the sellers, and the sellers, are saying, yeah, raising their hand and saying, yeah, you know what, it sounds interesting. I can sell my home off market. I can save the realtor commission if I don't want to pay a seller's agent, right? A listing broker. I can save some money there because I myself, I'm representing the buyer, right? I came to them as a buyer representative, and I am going to continue to. I'm going to help the seller because I'm a broker and I'm called, to work at a higher level in my industry, and I'm also called to treat the public at large honestly, fairly, transparently. So I can, I'm not going to dispense advice to them, obviously, because that's dual agency, and that's against the law in Texas. But what I am going to do is I'm going to shoot them straight, right, and say, well, this is my buyer. I would like for you to pay my commission, my compensation, but here's why you would want to work with them. Number one, you don't have to go through all that real estate stuff. You don't have to get the home ready and with pictures and professional photos and stage and then have the whole process of people, droves of people trudging through the home and making all those appointments, got to park down the street with the dog, load up the dogs and the kids and keep the dishes washed and the laundry picked up for how many weeks or months or whatever until the home sells. I'm offering a convenience to them. And in doing so, a couple benefits. Number one, they get the home sold in what is a pretty slow market right now. And number two, they sell to a buyer who may or may not have a contingency. They're probably not going to make a big deal about a home sale contingency because, again, the convenience factor. Number three, the seller gets to take their time to move because maybe they were contemplating a move, maybe they weren't. Because they're not on market, because if they were, they would have been their agent that would have represents them that would have called me, not them. Because once you have endorsed with an agent, on the buy side or the listing side, it's required by the documents therein, that you need to now have your representative handle that for you. So their agent would have called me, right, if they had an agent. But they're in the preliminary phase. They were like, you know what, honey, we look at this. We have got someone who's interested in our house. Should we call them? And so yeah, they call me up and they said, let's open a dialogue. And then it may or may not make sense. So they're not obligated to sell at any price, and the buyer's not obligated to buy, right? If I can be, a go-between and help that buyer and seller come to terms and come to a meeting of the minds, then I can, of course, write all that up, deliver it to title, and make sure it runs smoothly for all parties. They get to save money. They get to get their house sold in a slow market. They get to, they achieve their sales objectives. I'm going to give them all of their comps, and I'm going to treat them again very, very fairly and tell them, maybe this is what the house is worth, right, in this market. And we're going to take everything into consideration so the sellers feel comfortable, right? We're not looking to steal anybody's house, and it's not a unethical way to kind of get the property off of them that for a cheap price. It's to treat all parties fairly and honestly, but achieve my buyer's objectives in this case, right? Why? Because we found them a home that nobody knows is available. They're literally in a category of one buyer. That's it. One buyer, one seller. I literally have sat down at kitchen tables, and, with both sides. Now, my community will say, you can't do that. You can't bring a buyer and a seller together. You can't. Well, those are the social norms, and those are the norms of the industry. But there's so much going on right now, so much change in our industry that we have to think outside the box, and we have to be unique. I'm offering a service which is unique, and listen again, the only employment contract, if you will, right? The only thing that's been written on paper is that buyer representation agreement, because I represent the buyer. Either it's the one pager with now the Texas Real Estate Commission, issues our license, is come up with a promulgated a form that's one pager or the typical 5-page buyer bid. You guys endorse. You work with me, right? And I'm only representing one side. But again, if the seller wants to bring in their attorney, great. Bring the attorney, bring another realtor if you want to pay them, bring whatever you want to do. This is nobody, it's not a Godfather type of deal, right? I mean, whatever you're comfortable with. But I have a way of treating people in such a way that they feel comfortable with me, right? Because they know I'm shooting them straight. I'm a sincere guy, and I want to do the right thing, uh, and create a win-win situation. Because if it's not a win-win, then it's not worth doing, right?
Yeah.
So Perfect Home Finder is interesting that way, right? And again, it's a proprietary method, and I'm aware of everyone who does it, right? So it's a really cool way to help buyers find off-market properties because and then the other benefit to the buyer is that it was an off-market sale, so the taxing jurisdictions don't know how much they paid for it. Property taxes, right? All that public information, they can find out the BCAD, Bexar County Appraisal District, when next year they're going to write up what they feel, that's valued at, the property tax evaluation, right? So the appraisal, there's the appraisal, there's the assessment, right? What do you assess? What do you actually pay? But there's the appraisal initially. They say, well, the house is worth this. Well, what is that? Well, based on record, we know you sold it, and they can find that out through the local board how much was paid because as soon as it gets listed for sale, they have to. The MLS is transparent. They have to. You don't have to announce it to everybody, to the public, but you can find that out, right? And so once you do that, they know you paid, $520 for the house. But if you've sold the property off market, the buyer benefits because they don't know that they paid $520. It's not a matter of record, and Texas is a non-disclosure state.
Okay. So they don't that information doesn't have to.
As I mentioned, I used to live in Illinois, and my friend was a realtor over there, and he showed us some properties over there. And Illinois, you can find out right down to the penny how much the seller owes on their house. You can look that up. You can't do that in Texas. You can't. That's a non-disclosure state. And so you don't know how much is left on their mortgage, right? I mean, Illinois, you can do that. In Texas, you
Oh, go Texas.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So well, and I mean that's that. So the perfect home finder application is so it's obviously a product of someone who's a servant educator realtor. So I will get you out of here with a couple more questions. Just appreciate you taking the time and going through all of this. But one thing I guess of interest throughout the entire process, and it is a journey from start to finish, which part of it, I guess, so to speak, brings you to life, gives you the most pleasure? Is it just the starting process of seeing someone take the journey that never thought they could? Is it when they finally get the keys, or is there, any point in between that where brings you the most life and just the most joy in the process?
Let me start by saying that the entire process, because like I said, it's a process we go through and not an event. It is a lot of highs and lows. Every day you got the peaks and the valleys, and it's a lot. It's a roller coaster ride, man. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Because of all the different nuances, right? And by the way, my YouTube channel that I referenced, I've got a buyer series is like 12, 13 videos, start to finish. What to expect? They're all like, they're bite-sized, man. They're like 2-3 minutes a piece. And every step by step of the process of buying a home. Likewise, the seller series is a lot shorter. I mean, obviously there's not fewer steps, but we're talking like 6 or 7 videos. And so if our audience is interested in learning a little bit more about that process, what does it entail anyway? Well, there's a step-by-step process you can find on Referred Sell San Antonio Real Estate, which is my YouTube channel. What I was saying is that there is there's a really, really cool thing that we can say about the elation, so the highs and also the lows, because we go through it throughout the entire process. I think that the highest high, which is your question, is gonna be when we hand those keys over to somebody. The smile on their face, the look in their eyes. My clients are pretty. First of all, video obviously is key, right? It's key to everything we do in the real estate business. But I try to get video testimonials from folks that I've worked with, and I tell them that ahead of time. Hey, listen, if you've enjoyed my service, or there's something that that stands out about my service, I'd like for you to tell the public if you don't mind. I'm going to ask you at the end, if you'd be willing to refer my services to others, and maybe even do a video testimony if you don't mind, right? So when people are shy, camera shy, I'm not obviously going to compel them to be on camera if they're not comfortable with that. I'll introduce myself and the fact that we're at the title company, because we're literally at the closing table, right? And I point the camera to the ceiling. So you look at the T-grid ceiling,
Man.
a commercial ceiling, the title company, and I'm talking to them, and you can hear their responses on video, just not seeing it for some folks. And there are some video testimonials on my page, on my YouTube channel, where you can see their faces and where I'm interviewing them. But there's some where it's just their voice, right? But that's like the key time, right? That's the key element. Why? Because there is elation, there is excitement, there's joy, and I really think that that's part of what makes my work so satisfying. Why is that? Is because, like you said, home ownership, how important it is, right? And I inked a motto years and years ago, probably about 9, 10 years ago. And I've since tweaked it a little bit, but passionately helping American families achieve the American dream one home at a time. And I've now, passionately helping real estate consumers, right? 'Cause it's not always families, right? But yeah, I believe that home ownership is still the cornerstone of the American dream, just like you do.
Yeah.
Right. And you and I are like-minded people and say that, well, I mean, I think it's a very, very important aspect, and it's a rite of passage. I think it's not that it's expected, because homeownership's not for everybody, I get it. However, they say that the average homeowner has 40 times the net worth of the average renter. Why is that? Well, it's a real simple thing. There's something called equity. If your house is worth $500,000 and you owe $300,000 on a mortgage that we were talking about earlier, the difference, the delta, is $200,000. That's your equity. And that shows up on an income statement. Your net, it's figured into calculating your net worth. You can ask AI, Google, whatever. Just is the equity in my home, considered to be part of my net worth? The answer to that is emphatically yes. So we all love Robert Kiyosaki. We've all read, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I've read Cash Flow Quadrant. Again, chapter 5 of Cash Flow Quadrant, he references a gentleman by the name of John Burley. I've gone to John Burley training, and he autographed page 1 of chapter 5 of Cash Flow Quadrant.
Yeah.
And so we've all read those books, great. And Kiyosaki for years has always said, well, a house is not an asset. I disagree. I think that it is. There's some value to that house. You can get loans based on that as collateral. And there's a lot of different things you can do with a home. So I really do think that it is an asset. So, and because it's perhaps one of the largest assets that a home buyer or a home seller is ever going to be involved with in terms of a transaction, we as a real estate community are charged with a very, very important duty, and that is to protect either that home value on the sale side, right, the equity, and try to squeeze as much equity as we can out for our sellers, or on the buy side, try to not to diminish the price of the house, but to try to negotiate the best deal for the buyers as they're acquiring this property. Why? Because, hey, listen, at the end of the day, it's where the buyers are going to lay their head. At the end of the day, it's where they're going to make their memories. So I know it sounds like a bunch of nostalgia and whatever, and maybe some people are not gonna dig this, but I just feel like I'm kind of nostalgic that way, that life is short and health is fragile. And because of that, it's important to make memories with family, friends, acquaintances. And where's the centerpiece of that? It's the kitchen of a home. It's the backyard of a home. It's the barbecues. It's let's grill, let's do some grilling this weekend. Let's hang out. Let's have a beer, whatever, right? those are making memories at that home that helped that family buy. Or like my client, I just interviewed her about 2 weeks ago. She bought a house for the first time, after many, many years, but everything about that home, it checked all the boxes, so to speak, right? Because she even had pictures from like 8 or 9 years ago of what she wanted for that home to look like her own little Pinterest deal, but on her phone, we found her a house right here off of 281 that had the same all the attributes she was looking for. It was perfect.
Yeah.
Right, and it was and that knowing that I played a part in making that happen for her and really getting her a pretty good deal along the way, and that she's gonna be making memories, and it checks all of her boxes, and she's retired from the military, so I got to serve as a combat veteran, which is awesome, because my dad was a combat veteran from the Vietnam era. He served in the mid-60s, early to mid-60s, which is the early part. He was a paratrooper. He was a airborne Green Beret, right? Army Green Beret. So he was 82nd Airborne, and he was advising. He was there, during the times we were advising. Yeah, the South Vietnamese, right? We were advisors, means it's a euphemism for being dropped behind enemy lines, and doing reconnaissance and stuff. So a lot of really, GI Joe hero stuff. So I really, really respect my dad for that service. And it's kind of like my way of also giving back to the military community because we are, after all, dubbed Military City. It's official, right? And the fact that I get to work with active duty military as well as veterans of the military, is it's something that it's something else, another component of the work that I do that makes me very, very happy.
Again, perfect realtor for the San Antonio area. Perfect. San Antonio properties, covering the entire gamut of real estate needs. So,
Thank
uh,
you.
yeah. And so last question, and it's somewhat of a selfish question, coming back to this whole thing about reaching out to the phenomenal ambassadors and the phenomenal compassionistas. I talk to the college students all the time about what I wish I'd done at their age, which is just get started in the process of home ownership or owning property, because that'll do nothing but go up in value. And they seem to get it sometimes, but at times I can still tell that they feel it's something that's out of their reach. And I wish I could just get them to pick up the phone and call and at least try. Just find out. What could you give some advice? It's a selfish ask. Could you give some advice to our compassionistas and to
Absolutely.
our 20-somethings out there when they feel it's unattainable for them to become home or property owners?
So, yes, absolutely. I'm happy to dispense some advice on that front, and it makes me so happy. It's so good that you're helping the youth, kind of look at things in those terms, right? In those in the terms of homeownership. Why? Because I think it's a very important aspect, and again, even a rite of passage in a lot of ways, right? And so I'm glad that you're involved at your level, right, to help people understand that. So I love the question and thank you for asking it because I would start by saying that it's important for the youth, for anybody really, to live within their means, first of all. But what does that mean really? Well, it means that, what you have when you buy a house, as you know, you have a DTI, which is a debt to income ratio. It's basically derived from how much you have coming in each month from all your income sources and how much even child support, whatever that is, disabilities, whatever. That's your income, and then you have what you have going out versus your assets and liabilities, right? And they want to know how much, based on that is a relation to one to the other, and they derive a percentage based on that. And certain loan types, they require you not exceed a certain percentage for that DTI, right? For example, I think the absolute most that FHA, right, the Federal Housing Administration will allow for one of their loans. It's a government-backed loan, but they won't let you go over a 35, 40%, on that DTI. Why? Because you have to have some money left over, right, for yourself to be able to afford the house. That's what they're really doing in the underwriting process. Is at the very heart of it is that they're trying to determine, can this borrower, this prospective borrower, make that payment each month? Will they in good faith, make that payment, right? I mean, they want to make it, but can they make it, right? We can all say, well, let me sign this promissory note, it's a promise to pay. When they sign the promissory note at closing, they're going to test that they'll be able to that they want to make the payment, but can they? And that's what the underwriter does, right? And so I would tell, young people especially, live within your means, right? We all love to have coffee out, and that's great. Every single day, frankly, is not necessary. It really isn't. It's not. I know Dutch brother, Dutch bros, whatever, you wanna have, the coffee and the Starbucks and the cool. Can I tell you though, I mean, do you really need a $7, $8 Trenta, whatever, 30 ounce, a quart? It's a quart, okay? Do we really need that much, and sugar, and just whatever. It's not for me to judge, and I will not judge. Let me just say that I just feel like it's unnecessary. Instead, what if you drank some drip coffee, or was it the rise, the mushrooms and that kind of thing that a lot of people are doing? My daughter's doing she's in college, and she's doing a coffee cleanse right now for 6 months. She's, doing the mushrooms, whatever, great. Whatever that is to get your caffeine, it's great. But guess what? You can also do that at home. Can't tell you, I know young people are probably not gonna have a Costco membership. It was just them, right? Go ask a friend or a family member or something, and go get you a big bag. We get the beans, the big bag of beans at Costco. I forgot how many ounces it is. Is it, I don't know, it's like a kilo or something? I don't know. No, not kilo. It's 8, no, I don't know. Anyway, not important. So they get the bag of beans and we grind it at home. And how many pots of coffee can you make with that? And it's like $15. So for 2 of those drinks, 2 and a half, 3 of those drinks, you could make your coffee at home and save a ton of money. Now you say, well, okay, all right, hey, come on, that sounds like old people talking. Okay, yes, I'm old. And maybe, but it starts with that. It starts with budgeting. I might also recommend, Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey, something like that. And he advocates for the envelopes. So your budget has, you have so many things that you spend on each month: clothing and light and water and utilities, car payment, whatever. And then in that envelope, you put that money aside for each thing, right? And for spending. And you allocate your budget based on that, but to where you have some money left over, so you're saving, okay? So, and then once you get to the end of the month, and if you have no money left in the envelope, well, guess what?
That's yeah.
You're not going out that night. It's just that simple. Yeah. So anyway, budgeting is super important. Why is that? Okay, so because right now, one of the ways I'm helping my buyer clients win in this competitive marketplace, and really, frankly, in any marketplace, is through assumable mortgages. Okay, so what we're doing is, even this house was sold with an assumable mortgage. So they had a 2.375 VA loan. So because when people say, I can't afford a house, the interest rates are 7% or 6.5%. I understand it. How much house can you afford if it's 2.375? Remember, if Mark Twain, the author, were still alive today, he'd be 190 years old. And he would say that only one time in his lifetime did he ever see mortgage rates below 3. And that was 2 years ago during the pandemic, right? Because it ain't ever gonna happen again. I mean, so you're waiting for rates to come, sub 3 again, it ain't gonna happen. But if you get an assumable mortgage, you buy a home with an assumable mortgage, and I can help you find those, why not do that? Now, why do I mention it? Because you need to have the cash to give the seller to make them whole. But again, we talked about equity, right? The difference between what the house is valued at, or in this case, sells for, and how much they still owe on the mortgage.
Yeah.
The buyer has to come up with that difference. But guess what? If you had cash to spend on that seller's equity at closing, then the rest of your payments, you're gonna assume the mortgage. So if it's a 30-year note and they have 27 years left, you're getting a mortgage only 27 years left. That's it.
Mm.
Whatever's left on that, that's in the balance. But because they're selling the house with the mortgage, so you get the interest rate, you get the number of years left, you get the balance that's left. That's it.
Yeah.
And guess what else? Typically, you can expect to pay in closing costs 3 to 5% of the purchase price of the house in closing costs when you're getting a financing, getting a loan to buy that house. Okay, 3 to 5% of what the company that I work with, they're experts in assumable mortgages, and you know what they charge for their services? 1%
Mm.
of the purchase price. 1%. So now you've saved yourself in interest alone tons of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars maybe over the life of a loan in interest alone. And then you've also saved yourself on the top, on the front end even. So now you have more cash to put toward that big down payment for the seller. So that's important because if the youth has money to deploy when that time comes, because you never know when you're going to find a really good deal, that's why I would say be savers. Don't live paycheck to paycheck. I would say budget for it and be ready to, be ready to put a sizable down payment down. Don't go with that, zero down payment stuff, even if you're a veteran, you don't have to, because USDA loans are also zero down payment. You don't have to be a veteran for that. That's USDA. So have some equity in the house, right? Put some down payment money down. In this case, you can save yourself a ton of money in the long run, right? If you do these, like I said, this simple tip that I've been doing to help my clients win in this environment, right? High interest rate environment. So before we close, I want to say something real quick because I know that and I want to say that again, I'm excited about this. I'm so happy for your involvement because you've been a podcaster for years. You and I were in a podcast together. How many years ago was that?
That was 2020, right?
5 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. They can find it online, I'm sure. I think it's
Might
on.
argue to this.
Yeah. You're going to recognize this gentleman,
Right.
folks, because you're wearing a long beard and you're a lot thinner now.
Yeah. So
So it's the same guy.
pandemic weight. Like,
Yeah, it's the same guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm proud of you, man.
hey, you look the same though. That's the testament. You look the same back then as you do now. So that's
Yeah, diet and exercise, man. What did I say? But I really, the fact that I have an experienced podcaster on my team, number one, means a lot to me. But the other thing is that really, thanks for helping me get this off the ground. And thank you also for being a part of my marketing team because you've taken on the role of chief marketing officer. You're my CMO. It's important because I talk about that in my listing presentations because I use target marketing for my sellers. I use the perfect home finder for the buyers, but I use target marketing for sellers, which again is unique to what anybody does. So that's the uniqueness, right? I tell people all the time where Santino Properties LLC is a boutique real estate brokerage helping our buyers and sellers win in a competitive and crowded marketplace through the unique and effective use of marketing. Why is that? Because you got to use marketing to be able to help your clients achieve their objectives. But the other thing I'll say is that I'm excited that you guys are on my marketing team, right? Because you guys have experience in that realm, right? We met 10 years ago. It's hard to believe, but that Luby's downtown. Remember, is it still there? Or no, it's still there or not? But you just did that marketing thing for entrepreneurs, and you and I met 10 years ago.
Yep.
So it wasn't like you and I just, hey man, you want to start a podcast? This is like last year. So we just met. I mean,
years of knowing character, knowing your character.
that's a long time of friendship, exactly, right? And we have that mutual trust, with each other. So I appreciate you being on board and taking this real estate journey with us, and being a part of our marketing team.
Well, yeah, no, that's like I said, knowing character, knowing your character, knowing what you put into it, not just in terms of your work ethic, but in terms of caring about the people that you're helping. If we can take some of the marketing stuff off, because you're a hard worker and even in your marketing techniques.
Thank you.
So you've got a solid foundation. If we can take some of this off of your plate so you can be free to focus on helping more people, that's a good thing.
Thank you, and really that just kinda real quick to dovetail on that, I feel like that's also a reason why, of some of the ideas for the name of our podcast that you gave me, that you came up with. I really loved, the San Antonio Referral Room simply because it's not only about real estate.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, we're gonna talk a little bit about real estate, and it's gonna be important, for us to kinda mention that because it's what I do for a living, right? Every single day, I'm a full-time realtor. However, I think it's important to also touch on the fact that we're gonna also be I'll be interviewing, a lot of, thought leaders here in San Antonio. Leaders in different industries, car industry, education. I'm gonna be, my buddy is the head man at one of the high schools here. He already told me last year that he would be on a podcast because we had already kinda started thinking that I wanted to start interviewing people, and he agreed. I saw him at the post office last year, and we know each other very well, and I think that would be really, a really good resource for relocation clients, for example.
Okay.
Okay. So people that are moving to our area because we get so much relocation traffic, as you well know, for military PCS or permanent change of station, or maybe it's, the job market because we have so much going on right now in terms of the job market, and a lot of companies that are relocating to San Antonio, and as well as a better cost of living, that kind of thing. So we get a lot of relocation traffic. And it's important, for us to be a resource to them as well. So that way they look into our podcast, they can see a little bit about some of the schools. And that's why I'm going to be interviewing, school principals and real estate attorneys.
Hmm.
Not just real estate, also family law. I think it's important. Unfortunately, divorce rate, but also for probate, things of that nature, right? And how it relates to real estate as well because of the probate process. We'll have some really good questions to ask those folks. Real estate appraisers, real estate inspectors. I have real estate investor lined up already. A friend of mine is an investor. Um, and I have a whole list of industries that I want to touch on, right? So that's why I called it ultimately the San Antonio Referral Room because it's not only about real estate. If somebody sees that in the podcast title, they're going to say, "Well, I don't need it. I don't need to buy a house right now, or I'm not in the market to buy or sell a house. What's the big deal?" But I don't want to watch this. But at the same time, we want to be a resource to folks in San Antonio, give back to our community that we love so much. This is where I chose to raise my kids.
Yeah.
I believe in this community. I love the history, the culture, the people. I love the city. I've spent not all my life, but a good part of my life, maybe close to half my life in San Antonio. That's because I've lived elsewhere, other states. But I've spent a lot of time saying, I love the city, and I want to give back to the city. And I think that by having people of prominence join me on this podcast, it's gonna be a great way for me to also communicate to the public and to my audience about a whole variety of industries.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is a great way to this has been a great way to intro the concept to the community as well as give the community. I mean, not just the San Antonio community, but the global community, whoever can see this and benefit from it. I think this is a great way for them to be introduced to you in this concept as well. So I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and discuss it. And I'm just looking forward to this journey.
I'm looking forward to it as well, brother. Thank you again. Appreciate you being here.
Appreciate you.
Okay, looking forward to it.
Yes, sir.